You've met other people before, right? Do you like it when they get right in your face and they ask you a really awkward question? They put you on the spot. How many times today have you gone to the bathroom? Something like that. Like, I don't know, do you enjoy that when they ask you sort of tough questions that aren't super fun to answer? It's kind of a little bit weird, a little bit embarrassing, a bit awkward. You can't really say what you want to say, or whatever. Well, recruiters are people too, although it's sometimes hard to see that. They don't like it either. And part of making a pitch for yourself, especially to a hiring manager, especially because they're the ones that are going to be working with you if you get hired, is they need to feel good about you. They need to feel like this is going to be pleasant. It's not going to be awkward. It's not going to be unpleasant or off-putting. I want to work with people that I get along with, that are easy to work with. I do not want to work with somebody that's going to make me feel awkward, or that doesn't seem to realize that asking awkward questions are not good. Like, that's not what makes you look good. So that is prioritized above, like, oh, I need to know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask that so I get an answer. You know what I mean? Even the questions you ask them in an interview, like when they say, do you have any questions for us? It's a performance, It's not about what you really want to know about the job. There'll be plenty of time for that later if they give you an offer and it works out. There'll be plenty of time to answer all your questions then, right? Or if it's a really big concern, you can ask those questions after they've given you an offer, and you want to check a few things and see how you feel about it, before accepting, right? But now is not the time to say, I really want to know this, so I'm going to ask it, and it might not be fun or welcoming or endearing to ask it. The entire job interview is a performance on your part. You're being judged for the entire thing. And at the end of the interview, when they ask you if you have any questions, that's your last chance to make a good impression. So you ask questions that signal good things about you. They signal you care about the job. The questions you ask, that you choose to ask, they signal that you know how to do the job. Instead of putting them on the spot, making them feel weird. There's some questions like that say, if you were CEO of this company, what problem would you fix? And that means they have to admit that the company has all kinds of problems, and this is what what they would do to fix the place where they work. They're not going to do that. You're putting them on the spot, right? Abood says, can I ask in the interview, is there training or course you would like me to take? Does it show initiative? It's not about showing initiative. I don't think that's the end of the world to ask that. It doesn't feel awkward, but it's not the best question to ask. It signals that you might not be qualified, or you might feel you're not fully qualified, by asking things like that. That's one of the questions I was talking about when I said there's plenty of time later to ask that stuff, okay? Either they pick you or they don't. Is asking a question like that going to lead to people picking you? Probably not, because you're asking about a potential weakness you have. The weakness is that you're not trained enough. Would you like me to take more courses? Do I need to take more courses? This kind of thing. It's why are you thinking that way? Do you feel like you need to take more courses? It's bringing up that issue. So, listen, it's totally a judgment call, but in my opinion, I would not ask that question first. I would ask other things before asking those questions. Listen, what you want to do in a job interview is you want them to like you, okay? Now, if you put them on the spot and create awkwardness, that's the opposite of trying to get them to like you, right? You want them to have a fun experience. When you walk out of the room, you want them to think, wow, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I'm a little bit sad that's over, That's what you want. So anything that doesn't contribute to that, you shouldn't do, right? So ask yourself, is that what you're going to get by asking, different questions? Now, what questions should you ask? Okay, here's what I would say. If they say, do you have any questions for us? Usually that means you can certainly ask 3 questions, okay? Possibly 4. The last question you should always end with is, where do we go from here? Right? For a variety of reasons. First of all, it's nice to know that, but are you going to notify me? Should I check a website? Whatever. When will you make a decision? Stuff like that. So that's nice to know. But also it signals that you care. I want to know where this goes. Because sometimes people go to an interview and by the end of the interview, they don't care anymore. It's like, this clearly is not what I'm interested in. So I really don't care where this goes because it doesn't look like what I thought it was, right? So you ask that question, it at least shows that, you're interested in seeing if you get this, you care, right? Okay. Now, before you end on that, you should ask 2 or possibly 3 questions. Okay. Now, one question you could ask is like, I was going to do a video on this. Like, what are recruiters looking for? They're looking for someone who can do the job. Okay. So if you ask, like here's kind of a shortcut. If you know the toughest aspect of doing the job and you say it before they do, that signals that you understand this job. You know how to do the job, right? So if you ask questions to the effect of like, for the person in this role, what would be the immediate priority for them to accomplish or to work on? What would be your expectations for them in the first 30, 60, 90 days? That's a good question to ask, right? They also want someone who is going to come in and they're not going to create issues. They're going to work well with everyone. They're going to get over the learning curve. They're going to fit right in. They're going to interoperate with everyone properly and work out. So you can ask them a question about the working environment or about the other people they're going to be working with. Here in this team, what is a sign of a great employee? Like how do employees support each other here? Something like that. That shows you're thinking about that stuff. That shows like that's where your head's at. When I come in, I want this to work out. So I'm asking for, what would help me work out? Get along with everyone, interoperate with everyone. These are great things to signal to them, right? It's like, you're asking the right questions. Some more neutral things are like, what's the biggest challenge going to be for this role going forward? What's going to be the biggest challenge for this organization going forward, that I could perhaps contribute to? Things like this, right? Those are all good questions.